While fishing in the middle of the jungle, a man hears the roar of an animal and decides to run away to avoid being devoured. Scared, he walks through the forest and finds the egg of an unknown animal. Then a huge dinosaur appears to retrieve it. 5 years later, in a research laboratory, a group of scientists are studying the DNA of a giant crocodile, and Dr. Yost injects the animal with a substance in an attempt to awaken its most primitive genes. However, instead of changing its body, the crocodile becomes more aggressive and needs to be fought with tranquilizer darts. As his experiment has failed, Yost orders his helpers to eliminate the animal and freeze its organs to be used in future studies. A few miles away from the laboratory, in a paleontology museum, a group of young students are being taught about dinosaurs. During his science teacher's explanation, Chris begins to wonder if it's possible that a dinosaur has survived on Earth and is wandering around undiscovered. However, the woman claims that this would be completely impossible and informs them that the largest living relatives of dinosaurs are alligators and crocodiles. The class then continues its tour of the museum, but Chris is distracted by looking at the large dinosaur skeletons, and his friends return to call him before the teacher realizes that the boy has disappeared. At the end of the excursion, Mr. Brown escorts all the students back to the school bus and makes a counting to make sure none of them have been left behind. Later, on his way home with his friends, Chris spots a mysterious store and decides to go in to have a look. While looking at the shelves, the boy realizes that the place is full of old junk, which makes him even more curious and excited to find out what he can find. When the store owner turns up to see him, Chris reveals that he's looking for something unusual, and the old man says he has something perfect for him. However, a mummified cat is not so different as to intrigue him, and not even a giant spider can attract his attention. So the salesman walks to the warehouse and returns with an old wooden box in his hands. However, Chris will only be able to open it when he proves that he is worthy of receiving what is inside. The boy then asks how much the box costs, but is surprised when the seller says he'll give it to him as a present on the condition that Chris promises to take very good care of whatever is inside. So, after taking the wooden box, the young man returns home and, when he gets to his room, tries to open it at all costs. However, he ends up being interrupted by the sudden arrival of his mother and decides to hide the box, as he knows she won't be happy to know that her son has accepted gifts from a stranger. When the woman leaves, Chris continues his mission to open that trunk and realizes that it has unlocked itself. When he opens it, the boy finds a huge egg and starts searching for videos on the internet to find out which animal it belongs to. At this point, Chris decides to hatch the egg, because he knows that this is the only way to discover the truth. So, after covering it with warm towels, he goes to dinner with his parents and leaves the table before even eating dessert, because he's so excited about his new project. When he returns to his room, the boy notices that his egg is moving and, to his surprise, when he opens it, a small dinosaur appears. As soon as it was born, the animal started running around the room and, after knocking over everything around it, hid under the bed. In an attempt to lure it out, Chris scatters some sweets on the floor and manages to make friends with the creature. When he realizes that the hatchling is still hungry, he goes to the kitchen to get a piece of apple pie and, when he returns, he finds his room completely destroyed. Looking closely at the dinosaur, Chris realizes that it is bigger than when it was born and decides to give it a name. From then on, the animal was named Albert and began to play with the boy as if he were a pet. That night, Chris uses some clothes to make a bed for his new friend and, the next morning, decides to take him to school. His biggest challenge is to train the dino so that he goes unnoticed by people, but he can't hide him from John and Carrie. In the morning, when his friends meet him on his doorstep, Chris reveals that he's got a pet dinosaur, and Albert soon forms a friendship with Carrie, but doesn't like John very much. Since he can't tell his parents about the dinosaur in his room, Chris decides to go back to the antique store to talk to the owner. However, when he gets there, he realizes that the place is completely different and someone else shows up to serve him. The elderly woman then claims that she owns the store and has no other employees. At that moment, Chris sees the photo of the salesman who had attended to him the day before, and the woman reveals that he is her late husband. A few years ago, the couple decided to open the store in order to have something to do during their retirement, but 5 years ago the man disappeared into the forest and was never seen again. Frightened, the boy leaves and comes to the conclusion that he is going mad. Now his only alternative is to take Albert to the archaeology museum, and he ends up discovering that day, his teachers are there accompanying another class on a new expedition. While trying to hide from them, Chris looks at dinosaur skulls in an attempt to find out which species his animal belongs to. During his investigation, he discovers that Albert is a carnivorous dinosaur baby belonging to the genus Albertosaurus. Seeing the fossils of his distant relatives scattered around the site, the creature jumps out of his backpack and ends up attracting the attention of some visitors, who begin to think that he is some kind of robot very similar to a real dinosaur. While the couple are taking some photos, Albert runs off and Chris chases after him. At that moment, Dr. Yost is on his way to his office on the second floor of the museum to meet Roberts. The man went there to present the new fossils that his team found during an excavation, but Yost claims that those samples will not contribute to his research. What he's really looking for is a frozen dinosaur or an unpetrified egg so that he can obtain viable DNA samples. On hearing this, Roberts says that if something like this were found, it would be worth a fortune, but Yost assures him that he is willing to pay. After saying goodbye to the archaeologist, Dr. Yost returns to his laboratory while Chris continues to try to catch his Dino, who is running all over the museum. As he approaches the security room, the scientist spots a dinosaur in the images captured by the cameras and rushes to try and find the specimen that is loose in the museum. Wherever he goes, Albert causes people to panic because they have never seen such a frightening animal. After chasing the baby for a few minutes, Chris finally manages to get close to him, but just as he is about to catch him, Albert manages to escape once again. Then the children who are visiting the museum in the company of Mr. Brown enter the room and, unexpectedly, Yost appears. When he spots Chris, the scientist begins to chase him, as he knows he is also after the dino. As he approaches the lake, Albert sees his reflection in the water and gets scared, so he runs in the opposite direction. Just as he was about to jump from one rock to another, Chris caught up with him and used his backpack to capture the animal. Just then, Yost appears and tries to steal the boy's bag, but he manages to escape and takes a break from the supermarket to buy some food for the dinosaur. As the young man walks through the corridors, Albert is spotted by a dog and almost attacked by it. Then, when Chris is on his way to the checkout to pay for his shopping, a lady sees the hatchling and panics. Frightened by the dog's barking, Albert runs off and, once again, Chris has to go after him. While trying to escape from the supermarket, the dino causes a huge mess and is caught by many people who wonder what the creature is. When Albert finally manages to get out of the store, he spots an elderly man storing his shopping in the trunk of his car and decides to hide inside. At this point, Chris loses sight of his friend and, when he finds him, it's too late as he can't reach the vehicle. When he got home, the elderly man went to get his shopping from the trunk and found the little monster devouring all his food. Immediately, the man ran to get his shotgun and called the police after firing the first shot. Luckily, Albert wasn't hit, but he was captured by the police and taken to the police station. In an attempt to find out where that giant reptile came from, Captain Williams decides to call Dr. Yost. The scientist then says that the specimen has escaped from his laboratory and immediately mobilizes his team to go and get it. A few minutes later, when Chris arrives at the scene, he sees Albert being taken away by the car and goes to meet him at the police station. However, when he realizes that the hatchling is much bigger than it used to be, he gets scared and starts thinking about what to do to get it out of that cage. Sitting on a bench in the police station, the young man meets the guy who gave him the egg and is advised to take the animal to a forest far away from humans, because only then will Albert be safe. At that moment, Dr. Yost appears and says that he is there to recover the specimen that escaped from his laboratory. So, with the help of his team, the man loads the cage with the animal into a van and Chris despairs when he sees his friend being taken away. Luckily, the old man knows where they're going and says he'll help them get there. Meanwhile, Yost feels like the luckiest man in the world for having found a specimen that everyone thought was extinct. The man plans to create several other dinosaurs from Albert's DNA and thus achieve his goal of becoming a rich and famous scientist. According to the old man, Yost and his team are taking Albert to the forest, where they have a secret laboratory. To get there, the old man decides to use a quad bike that he has built himself and, once they have both put on their helmets, he starts it up. On the way, the pair have to stop at a traffic light and Chris ends up being caught by his father. Luckily, the man is exhausted from his work and comes to the conclusion that he is seeing things that don't exist. Determined to get Albert back, the boy decides to continue his journey, even though he knows he could be grounded until he turns 18 if his parents find out what he's doing. Meanwhile, Dr. Yost arrives at his secret facility and reveals to his collaborators that the entire team is about to go down in history, as he has managed to capture a real dinosaur to be used in his research. On the way to the lab, the old man decides to use his quad's propulsion jets to increase his speed, but changes his mind when they almost have an accident. Suddenly, he discovers that the vehicle's brakes aren't working and asks Chris to take the wheel while he tries to fix them. At this point, the pair lose control of the quad and crash into a tree. Luckily, they both come out of the collision unscathed and decide to continue walking until they reach their destination. Then, when they find the facility, they come across a group of security guards and the old man uses some magic tricks to distract them. When he realizes that his plan hasn't worked out as expected, he decides to flee and, while the guards are chasing the old man, Chris has the opportunity to break in. While hiding behind the van, he realizes that the old man has been arrested and Yost orders the guards to get rid of him. Even though he's afraid of being the next victim, the boy walks around the camp looking for the dinosaur and tries to hide between the tents so as not to be noticed. After checking all the possible hiding places, Chris manages to find it, but the hut is completely closed, so he has to run to find another hiding place. After almost being spotted by Yost, the boy enters a stall and comes across one of the employees taking a nap. Terrified, he waits until all the guards are distracted to get out of there and finally manages to find Albert, who is now bigger than a human. While Chris thinks of a way to remove those chains and get the dinosaur out of the camp, two armed security guards show up and are about to arrest him. But before they could touch the boy, the old man entered the tent and attacked them with a metal suitcase. He then steals the keys from one of the guards to free the animal. Just as the pair were about to flee, Yost and his team appear and manage to surround them. The scientist then orders the security guards to arrest the invaders, but they all walk away when they realize that the dinosaur is free. Terrified, the group tries to flee and one of the soldiers manages to hit the creature in the neck with a tranquilizer dart. At that moment, Albert gets scared and runs off into the forest, but is followed by the pair who have gone there to rescue him. Furious at the prospect of losing his specimen, Yost orders the guards to go after him and not let him escape. Immediately, the team of soldiers begin a long chase through the forest and are accompanied by the scientists, who need Albert to be captured alive. As he already knows the forest, the old man guides Chris and the dinosaur throughout their escape and claims to know a perfect hiding place. However, while the trio are trying to escape, Albert becomes terrified and ends up taking a different route, so Chris decides to go after him. Realizing that his friend is paralyzed with fear, the boy tries to calm him down and asks the dinosaur to follow him. Together, they hide behind a large rock and it's not long before Yost shows up to look for them. As they can't find the animal and the boy, the team decides to keep going through the forest and, soon after, the old man appears. The trio then continue their escape and when they hear footsteps approaching, the old man orders them to hide under a ravine. As soon as their enemies leave, they start walking again and, when they reach a certain point in the forest, the old man says that if Albert and Chris continue together, sooner or later Yost will find them. So the best strategy for both of them to survive is for them to split up. While the boy returns home, the dinosaur must continue through the forest until he finds shelter in a place where humans will never look for him. Upon hearing this, Chris refuses to abandon his friend and says that the animal is his responsibility. However, when he realizes that the only way to keep Albert safe is to let him go, the boy says goodbye to his friend and, in tears, follows the old man in the opposite direction. When they find the road, the pair walk back to the city, but end up being captured by Yost's guards. The scientist then asks where Albert is and Chris says that he has gone to a safe place. The pair were about to be taken prisoner back to camp when the soldiers heard the police siren approaching and decided to flee. At this point, Chris and the old man manage to free themselves from the clutches of their enemy and, after losing the policeman, continue their walk to the city. When they arrive at the antique store, they sit down on a bench on the sidewalk and the old man says goodbye to Chris, because he knows that the boy needs to get home before his parents realize that he has disappeared. However, when the boy gets up to leave, John and Carrie show up and ask where Albert is. Relieved, Chris says that the dinosaur has been taken to a safe place and claims that the store owner was the one who helped him save it. However, when he turns to introduce his friends to the old man, the boy realizes that he has disappeared and regrets the fact that he never asked him his name. Before leaving, the boy decides to check out the antique store one last time and, looking through the glass door, he spots his friend. After saying goodbye, the old man disappears and Chris is happy to know that everything he experienced was real and not just a figment of his imagination. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps.